Hi and welcome back to Tales from Tech Support, /I don't work here lady. In today's episode, Tales from a Vaccination Clinic Volunteer. The Great Museum Fight. Go ahead and complain, they can't fire me. We're not a theater troupe, but thank you. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Tales from a Vaccination Clinic Volunteer. So I volunteer at a few vaccination clinics a week as a non-medical personnel. Generally we do 300 per clinic. My job is to sort people from a winding serpentine line, like at airport security, to one of the 1 to 6 lines where you'll get your actual jab. Each table has 2 nurses, and we all take a 15-minute lunch break in shifts, 2 quick bathroom breaks if we're lucky. My favorite part about the clinics, especially for older folks, is how nice they are and happy to be getting the vaccine. The late 70s and older folks are my favorite as they have experience with mass vaccination from the measles. When we get backed up and I have to wait for the lines to thin out, I get a nice chance to chat with some of them. When I say sorry for the wait, when I have to pause, dozens, some days nearly 100 of them, when we're targeting older folks, will say something like, "Oh, I don't mind. This is moving much smoother than the measles vaccine site." So, one of the nurses had the audacity to take her lunch break, which led to there only being 1 nurse for the line, and it temporarily moving slower. Cue the Karen. She gets out of line to storm over to me to tell me her line only has 1 jabber, and I shouldn't have sent her to that line, complaining how slow it is compared to other people's lines, etc. I apologize and explain the nurse will be back from lunch soon, offer to get one of the county employees to come talk to her. Now here's an interesting part. Almost every time someone complains, and I explain I'm a volunteer, and I look very young for my age, that I don't work there, and when I offer to get a manager they become indignant and say some version of "No, I am talking to you." Karen was one of these folks. So the cop in my section and I have really bonded over the crazy people we have to deal with a few times a day, so he looks at me, huge eye roll, starts walking over with his chest puffed out and hands under his bulletproof vest to look imposing and hover around Karen. She gets the message and gets back in line. Not 3 minutes later she comes storming back to inform me she does crowd control professionally, so I should listen to her. Her latest bit of feedback is we need people going through the lines taking elderly people's costs and sweaters off of them before they get to the table. Sounds like a quick lawsuit to me. Cue the cop, her going back to her line. This process repeats every 2 or 3 minutes with her coming back to give new feedback and ideas. Now the final time this happens, I genuinely have no idea what she was complaining about that time. I just tuned her out. This sweet little old lady, at least in her 80s, walker and all, was waiting at the door to be sorted and had seen Karen's perpetual berating from further back in the line. Little old lady to Karen, "Excuse me." Karen, still ranting about whatever the hell she's saying. Little old lady, "Excuse me." Karen, "What?" Little old lady, "Has anyone ever told you you're a real bitch?" Karen, mouth agape for 20 seconds, screams, "How dare you!" Little old lady, "No, how dare you, this young man is a volunteer and offered to get you a manager, and you're just being a bully." Police officer walks over, I can see him having a harder time suppressing his laughter than I was. Karen demands the women probably 30 years older than her be removed, and that she wants to press charges. Cop laughs and says, "What for?" The Great Museum Fight. Grab a sit, ladies and gents, I'm gonna tell you the story of how I had 2 museums fighting over me. I'm typing on my phone, so apologies if this format is a little wanky. For a little background, I worked as a teacher's aide at a science center from 13 to 17. It was a fun gig and I got kids and adults interested in whatever I is teaching, due to that fact that I can be extremely animated when I talk. Right next to our science center was a natural history museum. Ours was free to enter, but that one you had to pay for, unless you were an employee of one of the museums. Anyway, on this particular summer Friday day I was 16, and this was around the time a new dinosaur hall had just opened up at the NHM, so while I waited for my older brother to finish up his shift, we both worked there, I figured I'd go to the dinosaur hall and practice some sketching. While there and still in uniform, a woman that had to be in her mid-30s came up to me and asked if I can tell her about a specific skeleton she and her kids were looking at. Still being in work mode and loving to talk about anything prehistoric, I happily agreed. As I got into my mojo, more and more people came up to listen to what I had to say, asking questions and laughing at my horrible dino puns. About 20 minutes later I had about 40 people following me around the animal exhibits and having a ball, until that is, my brother texted me it was time to bounce. Bidding the group a farewell, I left to enjoy my weekend not knowing what was about to happen the following week. Turns out a lot of people at the Natural History Museum came up to various managers to say how I was an awesome tour guide, so much so one of the higher-ups had to find out more about me. Once she found out who I was and where I worked, she scheduled a meeting with my boss and the CEO of the Science Center. I come in on Tuesday, clock in, and was about to get my day started when I'm called in to see my boss. Walking into her office, I see her, the CEO of the SC, and a woman. Wondering WTF is going on, I ask what's happening here. The woman walks up and shakes my hand and said she was a hiring manager from the NHM. She was discussing with my boss how much someone like me would be perfect for the NHM. My boss cut her off to ask me what this was all about, then it hit me, last Friday. I then explained to my boss and the CEO what happened on Friday, and then they all had a look of clarity on their faces. The manager from the NHM was eager to get me on board, however my boss in the calmest, slyest manner said that was never going to happen. The manager looked at her with silent rage and asked why she thought that. My boss said 1. We have a contract with him, so he can't just join you, and 2. He's only 16. What I later found out is that the NHM only hires adults. The manager looked at me with confusion. I look about 3 years older than I am. I think it's the height and mustache. This next part one will never forget, my boss said with a grin that looked like it belonged on the love child of the Grinch and the Cheshire Cat's sorry manager, but this one's ours. The manager left in a huff, clearly upset she lost the fight. After we knew she was gone, the CEO was pissing himself laughing. Through tears and gasps he told me try not to do that again. My boss said I might want to stay away from the NHM for a while. The manager wasn't the type to give up so easily. And that's how I became a sort of legend amongst the staff, is the SC. Go ahead and complain, they can't fire me. This happened yesterday at a large box store known for their cheap prices and interesting people who shop there. A bit of background, I recently was outside in the cold too long, and had hypothermia with other issues, and still have very large third-degree frost burns on both of my feet. I have a hard time walking and it's quite painful, so I was using a scooter that the store provides for customers. Another important thing to note is that even though I live in a cold weather state, I rarely wear a coat, so I didn't have a coat on or in my cart. I'm driving the scooter through the store while my GF is walking next to or behind me depending on how many people are around us. We're just shopping, looking at things, pointing things out to each other, as people normally do. We are about a third of the way back into the store from the entrance. The doors are slightly visible, but we're not right inside the entrance. A woman walks into the aisle we are currently looking for something in and approaches me. I quickly try to move over to the side, thinking she's going to ask me to move, but instead she looks right at me and says, "I need that scooter." I'm a little bit flustered since I wasn't expecting that at all and I'm not sure what to say, and I say "excuse me," while I try to figure out what's going on. She responds that the scooters are for customers who need them and not for you to play around on. Now I'm getting irritated because who is she to say whether or not I'm entitled to use a scooter? My GF steps forward and says, "Ma'am, she needs this scooter. If they didn't have any more at the entrance, you can ask the greeter to check the other entrance." Which of course sets off this Karen. Karen goes into full-blown "the customer is never wrong" mode. She starts demanding that I get off the scooter immediately as she wants it right now, and I'm not supposed to be using it. Somewhere in her rant, she says that employees aren't allowed to play on the scooters. And then it clicks that she thinks I work there, despite the fact that I'm not wearing anything blue and am obviously shopping. I try to tell her that I don't work there, but she's too far into her rage to comprehend anything. She now has her hands on the front of the scooter and is demanding to see my employee ID. I back up the scooter to try to get a bit away from her and tell her again that I don't work there. My GF has gone to find an actual employee. Karen notices that my GF has gone and demands to know where she went, obviously thinking she's an employee too. I tell her again that she needs to stop, I don't work there, and I'm not giving her the scooter. I've had about enough of her, and am now contemplating running her over with it. My GF finally returns with a store employee, SE. SE asks what the problem is and Karen starts with, "This girl." When I completely interrupt her to say loudly that I was trying to shop when this woman started harassing me and demanding the scooter I was using. Karen's mouth starts flapping in the breeze as she can't believe how incredibly rude I'm being. She turns to the SE and asks why I'm being allowed to use a scooter. SE tells her that the scooters are for all customers and as long as I'm not causing issues, they have no reason to ask me not to. Karen hears only the part she wants to and says she is causing a problem. SE asks what the problem is and Karen replies with, "She won't give me the scooter." I look at the SE and ask, "Do you know me?" SE looks confused and says no. I ask, "Do I work here?" SE is now figuring out where this is going and says no. I say, "So I'm just a customer here shopping?" And SE confirms this. Karen stares in disbelief, then accuses the SE of covering for me so I don't get into trouble. She now wants to see SE ID badge and wants a manager, claiming she's going to get us both fired. I shout at Karen, a little louder than I should have, but I'd had enough of her, that I'm not an employee and she shouldn't be harassing the actual employees either. I might have called her crazy. During this, my GF went to customer service for more backup, because we weren't going to leave this poor employee to deal with the Karen by himself. She comes back with a floor manager or something similar right as I'm done telling Karen to stop harassing employees. The manager has already been filled in on the entire situation and apologizes to me and says she will take care of the situation. Do I need anything else? I politely tell her no, and thank her for dealing with the situation. As we leave the aisle, we can hear Karen screaming that I need to be fired while the manager tries to explain that she can't harass customers. I don't think she ever got it that I didn't work there. We're not a theater troupe, but thank you. Disclaimers: on mobile, English is my second language. This happened in the summer of 2004. My country has a lot of ancient ruins and a long tradition with the theater. Every summer around the country, a lot of theatrical festivals take place. The biggest and most famous takes place from early July to late August in the theater this happened, Epidavros, if you're interested. One of our friends had gotten a job for the tourist season in a hotel in a tourist spot relatively close to the theater. Most of our group were college students. We had the summer off and some of us decided to spend 2 weeks in the same place with our friend, not same hotel, but the same town. We spent our time visiting the beach and the clubs and generally having fun. Being so close to theater and with the festivities about to begin, we had decided to visit the theater one morning and if there was a show we liked in the 2 weeks, maybe catch that too. So, one fine Wednesday morning off to the theater we went. A small but important note for our group of friends. We all had amateurish experience with the performing arts, theater and dancing mostly, but some singing thrown in there too. So, our group of 3 girls and 3 boys arrive really early at the theater, with the plan to avoid the tourist rush, visit the theater first, and then the small museum, if it was open. We pay the admission, they checked our shoes, only flat shoes allowed, and in we went. The theater is in a forested area and has 2 paths leading to it. One leads to the stands and one leading to center stage. We took the one to the center stage, because frankly that was the most interesting part. You see, the theater is built in such a way that an actor can be heard to the stands from any part of the stage, while speaking in a normal voice. We walked around the backstage area and the stage for a while, admiring our surroundings. And then, because we were young, carefree and fearless, or stupid, depends on the interpretation, we decided to play something. After a small debate of what was proper for the area, what we remembered from school and performances, Antigone's monologue was inscribed in our young brains in school, and what would engage most of us, we ended up with a part from Lysistrate by Aristophanes, an anti-war comedy with feministic overtones. It was a play we all have taken part in a couple of years back, so we remembered it best. We started enacting the debate scene. When we started, we were alone, or thinking we were, and we got kind of focused in the enactment. At some point, I got a glimpse of a bright flash from the corner of my eye, but thought it was the sun reflecting somewhere. The enactment didn't last long, because one of us, Hi Mark, botched his line hilariously, making the rest of us break in laughter. And then we noticed. The flash of light wasn't from a reflection, it was from a camera. A small group of Japanese tourists were on the stands taking pictures of us. There were also a family of 4 watching us. Okay people. Let's go. We're interrupting their rehearsal, we heard the tour guide say. They thought we were actors rehearsing. I was pushed forward, spoke a bit better English than the rest, and I said, a bit embarrassed I admit, that we had finished and we were leaving. As we were leaving, the family approached us, smiling. They introduced themselves as Karen, nothing like a Caranosaurus by the way, and Steve. They had 2 daughters, one around 10 and the other around 7. They thanked us for the small performance. I was, again, assigned to explain we were not professionals, we're just young adults having some fun. Karen, oh darling, I know. But it was fun and you piqued the children's interest. The kids really looked interested in prepping to ask questions. The family accompanied us to the small museum, and then we had some coffee, where the kids started asking questions. We answered to the best of our abilities. Karen was a theater major and Steve ran his family's restaurant. He was the son of an immigrant from our country, and it was their first visit as a whole family to his parents' home.